Welcome to Friday Night at Harry. I'm Josh Ginsberg. I'm president of the Harry Institute, for those of you who have not been here before. And I'll just say, you may have noticed that there are a few seats that have things on the back. One of my staff is smiling because I do this every time. But those are reserved seats, and it is a perk of being an Aldo Leopold Society supporter of the Harry Institute. There are some of our most consistent and generous supporters. And if you too want to have a reserved seat, so you know you don't have to get here, today somebody got here at 5:30. You too can join the Aldo Leopold Society. So if you'd like to know more about it, either ask me or there's some information on the table on the way out. We're having a double header on a herpetology double header on October 21st. Dave Strayer, a distinguished scientist and stream and river ecologist at the Harry Institute, was going to be speaking, but he had to postpone his talk until spring. And so we're getting Dr. Karen Lips of the University of Maryland, who's done a lot of work on emerging infectious diseases in herbs, and particularly chytrid fungus, which is a horrible illness that is knocking out herbs all over the world. So Karen will be here on October 21st for our next Friday night. So if you want to make sure you get both double features, please come then as well. It is a privilege and a pleasure to introduce Harry Greene, who I have been a fan of from afar for many years. We actually never met until tonight. But he is a legend in herpetology and in conservation and in natural history, and those things are not all the same. He was mostly trained in Texas and Tennessee. The only thing that joins those is they're both T's and they're both from the South. He had a stint as an army medic in Germany, which I found interesting when I discovered that. And he came to hold chairs and professorships not just at Berkeley, but at Cornell as well, where he is currently the Stephen Rice Presidential Fellow and Professor of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. And if he puts that all on his business card, it's impressive. Next weekend, Cornell is celebrating Harry. So I'm glad he could come this weekend for his impending retirement with what they're calling a Green Fest. And in the announcement, the quote of the student is saying he's a mythological, herpetological green with an eating giant. And I'd like to take issue with that. He is a herpetological green giant, but he is not mythological. As I said, he's legendary. His reputation is based on decades of intensive research, hundreds of publications, and I think, for me, most importantly, his ability as a naturalist. And we're not training enough naturalists anymore. Naturalists are people who actually don't just study one thing, but actually care about the entire system and why things are where they are and what's where and how it got there. He has a particular passion for herpetofauna, although just told me he's working on primates now as well, and an inordinate fascination with snakes. His book, Snakes, the Evolution of Mystery and Nature, won several awards. The one I was most impressed by, I think, was the Penn Center Literary Award, in addition to making the New York Times annual 100 Best Books list. And there aren't that many science books that get a Penn Award. Penn is described as the world's leading international literary and human rights organization. It is an organization of journalists and writers. Right? So to get that award, I think, was important. And, as I read through his most recent book, Tracks and Shadows, Field Biology is Art, which I think is sort of the basis of tonight's talk, and it's an autobiography and a celebration of the beauty of nature. But it's an intensely personal narrative. And I think it's better written, right? And I think he got the Penn Award because it's better written than much of the literature I've read in the last few years. I checked with Harry because it's a very personal book. It's a very personal book. But in reading, about halfway through it, in reading it, I was struck by a couple sentences that brought me up short both for their intensity and their poetic beauty. So I just want to read them. Quote, a decade later and tenured at Berkeley, I lost an undergraduate advisor and a lover to murders. A heart attack had dropped my father, and several friends had died way too young. Their deaths provoked sensations of choking on explosions and desperate grappling, as if I might strangle reality back to the future. And at times, these people seemed oddly still present, like phantoms of an amputated limb. And after discussing his own personal brushes with mortality, he goes on to say, and this is what makes it relevant for tonight, Perhaps it's not surprising that natural-born killers inspire me beyond scientific justification, as if confronting their deadly essence might solve more private riddles. So it's a pleasure to introduce Harry and to ask him to talk to us about how the critters and the ecosystems in which they live inspire us to form the value systems that are so important to conservation. So Harry, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. It's a huge pleasure to be here, and we're going to see. Yeah, we can do this. You get to watch me really much. We promise we're going to do it. You want me to tell a joke? I've never told a herpetological plot joke in public. There really is a herpetological plot joke. There we go. I'm pretty sure the lights are going to come down so you have a little better view. So thank you for having me. It's a huge pleasure to be here. I've never been here before, although I'm very close friends with some of the people who work here. I'm going to talk to you tonight about why we care about nature, and I'm really grateful to Josh for mentioning my little book, Tracks and Shadows. Everything I'm going to talk about tonight is at least partly covered in this book. I sort of continued to explore these things since the book came out 2 years ago. And in fact, the book, as well as the projects I'm working on now with primates, all involve a sort of quest on my part to understand what it really means to say we are part of nature or disjunct from nature. So that's sort of encapsulated from this wonderful quote from Robinson Jeffers, fullness of life in things, love that, not man apart from that. Not man apart used to be the masthead of Friends of the Earth when I was a young professor at Berkeley. And I remember that phrase, not man apart. And of course we sort of bemoan the fact that we're disjunct from nature. And so that's sort of the kind of issues I'm pursuing. Sure. I have to say, we switch this part. How's my sound? Okay. Much better? Yeah. Oh, cool. Did somebody complain or you picked it up? All right. So here's where we're going in the next 45 minutes or so. I'm going to talk to you first a little bit about natural history and in particular about values and where they come from. I'm going to discuss in particular a distinction that the well-known 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant made between beauty and the sublime. I'm going to talk a little bit about Darwin and natural history. And then I'm going to use frogs to exemplify the points I'm making tonight. So there's actually a snake version of this talk, but I decided to give you all the frog version. And I think that's going to turn out to be good because you're going to have a wonderful talk by Karen Lips later this month, and Karen specializes in frogs. So my little mini herpetology class lecture on frogs is going to set you up for Karen's talk about the plight of frogs today. And then finally, after I've sort of illustrated this distinction between beauty and sublime with frogs, I'm going to reach out a little more broadly and show how the sort of facts we learned from science apply to more general issues in conservation. And I'll do this through a little bit of exploration of meaning these words of wilderness and wild. So why are we doing all this? Why would I want to talk about this? Why am I sort of consumed by it? And the reason is, here's the scene. Here's the situation we've got. This is the last 50,000 years, and here we are about 3,400 years ago. Then 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. The last known mammoth on Earth was about 3,400 years ago on an island off the coast of Siberia. About the same time that Babylon was being sacked. So I mention that for one reason, because I think a deeper historical perspective on our current plight is a really important one as we try to navigate the future in terms of biodiversity. So, here's the stretch of time, and here's what it was like when humans first came to North America, somewhere between 12 and 20,000 years ago, and here we move toward the future, and of course things get increasingly complicated, increasingly crowded, and increasingly desperate for diversity. And the question is, what are we going to do, and why would we do anything? So that's what I'll explore tonight. Why would we care, and how do we come to care more about some things? I think we're all teachers, whether we're nominally professors at universities or elementary school teachers or car mechanics talking to our friends over the backyard fence. We're all potentially teachers. And the thing I'm exploring is, well, how does that matter? How does providing information about organisms change people's values? This photograph is from the last natural history trip that I led at UC Berkeley before I moved to Cornell. This is my last Berkeley PhD student, Javier Rodriguez, and he was doing his doctoral dissertation on the feeding ecology of gopher snakes. So we're out in one of the East Bay Regional Parks leading a field trip with natural history of the bird with students. We flip over a rock. We find this juvenile gopher snake, which is dangling from Javier's hand right here. We see it's got a bulge. We know it's a food item, and so we gently palpate the last meal of this little gopher snake out of its stomach. Comes up the mouth. We get it out, measure it, weigh it, and so forth. And so this is a half-digested California bull, a juvenile. And Javier is sort of distracted. He's temporarily forgotten about the class he's teaching because he knows this is an additional data point to his doctoral dissertation. So he's going to weigh and measure it. We carry around these little things called solo scales. He's going to weigh that little mouse, weigh the snake, and so forth. He's noticed that the mouse came out the mouth of the snake rear end first, which means it was swallowed head first, and he's going to record that in his notes and so forth. What I think is fascinating is this woman right here. Her name is Karen Sin. She's now a medical doctor. Her nose is about 18 inches from a recently vomited half-digested mouse. And she could not be happy. Isn't that fascinating? And she's having what I'll come to describe in a few minutes as a sublime biological aesthetic experience. She's appreciating what she's seeing more because before we took her to the field, she had learned something about the population biology, reproductive biology, and so forth with the California vole. She knew from my lectures how it is that a gopher snake can swallow something weighing up to about a third or even half of its own body weight. Okay? So she's not having a naive moment. She's having a sort of prepared moment. And I think that feeds into the sublimity of her appreciation of this. So let's just talk just a little bit about values. I have to tell you or emphasize I'm not a philosopher. I actually did take philosophy a very long time ago as an undergrad. I'm not a philosopher. And so I'm simply repeating and sort of expressing things that I've read in several different books. I've shown some out here that I think are especially appropriate for looking at these things. But philosophers, when they talk about values, make a distinction between what are called instrumental values. Instrumental values are those that have to do with an ends to a means. Okay, they have to do with sometimes they're called utilitarian values. So instrumental values are things that help us do something or gain a goal. The opposite of those are what have often been called intrinsic values. And here we're talking about things that are irrespective of our judgments. They somehow have value unto themselves. Now it turns out that's pretty complicated. And I like a distinction that Ronald Sanders has made between what are called objective final values and subjective final values. So Sanders, instead of talking about intrinsic values, talking about final values, and distinguishes between objective final values, which are like intrinsic values. They are literally intrinsic to an object, to an organism, to a place, to whatever it is we're talking about valuing. Whereas subjective final values ultimately come from us, individually and by consensus. Okay? Now, if that's a little bit vague, first of all, let me emphasize the problem with intrinsic values and objective final values. And that is, your final values may not be the same as my final values. Okay? You can see this if you just think about religion. Everybody who's deeply religious believes that they're right. Okay? And the major religions of the world differ profoundly in some ways. So clearly everyone cannot be right when each religion is addressing some specific kind of issue. Okay? And that's the problem with objective final values, with intrinsic values. It's that you may regard an elephant as having an intrinsic value or right to life, and someone else may not. Subjective final values sort of takes us to thinking about it as something that we grow to have individually as a result of experience, religious teachings, time spent in the field catching frogs, whatever. And then by consensus, we arrive at sort of broader societal notions of these subjective final values. And let me just give you this example coming from art instead of from living organisms. These happen to be my two favorite paintings that I've ever seen. Okay? This is Goya's Tres de Mayo. It's in the Prado. If you've ever been to the Prado, Madrid, this painting is enormous. And it's in a room by itself, a fairly dark room. And it's absolutely powerful to walk in that room and see this painting of these faceless Napoleonic soldiers about to execute these peasants. This is a 4,000-year-old archaic period rock art panel from West Texas, where I did a lot of my research. This cat here is about 9 feet tall on the rock wall. It seems to be losing something out of its mouth. See this red stuff coming out? And it's still half full of whatever that red stuff is. And of course, I don't know what the artist intended. Perhaps blood, perhaps soul, I don't know. But for reasons of my own personal background, these are literally my two favorite paintings in the world. I could not even put a price on these. Okay? So in terms of value, I would regard them as literally priceless. But you might not. Okay? So again, this business of intrinsic value gets a little cloudy, and I think it's useful to think about subjective final values and where they come from. Just one more way to sort of set up this problem before we learn a little bit more about frogs. This snake is called an urutu in Portuguese. It's fairly widespread. This individual urutu is one of the handful of most beautiful animals I've ever seen in my life. I've had the good fortune to work in about 30 countries on all the major continents except Australia. I've seen most of the big cats in the field. I've been around elephants on foot. And of all those animals I've been around, this individual urutu, for me, is one of the handful of most beautiful creatures I've ever seen. I just love these inverted dumbbells, these silver outline blotches, these enamel flash marks on the face and so forth. I found her coming around the road in this national park in Brazil. Came around the corner, there she was, stretched out, crossing, walked up to her, she snapped into this defensive posture. I got close enough for pictures and then let her get on off the road. So, very, very beautiful animal to me. Here's what Charles Darwin said about the same species. The expression on the snake's face was hideous and fierce. I never saw anything like that. Okay? So once again, it turns out value is, to some extent, in the eye of the beholder. And how does that happen? Well, this brings us to Kant. And again, I want to emphasize that I'm not a philosopher. When I first discovered this Kantian distinction between beauty and sublime as a result of Ross Keister's paper about 20 years ago, and I started to think about writing about it and talking about it in public, I thought, well, maybe I should go read Kant. And I asked a philosopher if I should read Kant, and they just smiled and shook their heads. I did actually try to read Kant in English. And I got a few lines in and gave up. It's daunting for a non-philosopher, let's be clear on that. But I think, and so I'm relying on Ross Keister's analysis of Kant, and this is kind of an obscure paper. If anyone's interested in reading Ross's account of Kant's distinction, if you just shoot me an email, I'll send you a PDF of Ross's paper about Kant. Kant made a distinction between the beautiful, which he said concerns the form of an object being bounded. In other words, it has no context. It's what you see is what you get. In contrast to the sublime, which is formless and bound, it strikes the imagination in powerful ways. In other words, the sublime, as Kant was distinguishing these two things, was influenced by things you knew, things you saw, things you read, things you were told, and so forth. And let me illustrate this again with some inanimate objects. You're wondering why there's a picture of a gun on the stage. These are my 3 most prized material possessions. Okay? So if our house was on fire, besides Kelly and my dog Chico, I'd go grab these three things. That's the first thing I try to get out of the house. So let me tell you just a couple sentences about each one. This is a rolling pin. So my mother grew up on a dirt farm in East Texas in extreme poverty. This is a rolling pin that her father, my grandpa, who I adored as a little boy, her father carved this rolling pin out of a single block of white oak. It was the only Christmas present for a 17-year-old bride the year before my mom was born. And after my grandpa died, I eventually got this rolling pin, and I used it to make biscuits and shortbread dough and so forth. So you can imagine, little boy, farm in East Texas, grandpa, idolized. This means a lot to me. This blue book is called Bombers Across. It was written by a pilot of a B-24 bomber in World War II. My dad was a navigator of B-24s in World War II. And after my father died in 1985, my mother gave me this little book. Turns out this book had been sent by my father when he was 24 years old to his parents in Endicott, New York, annotated in pencil in the margins so that his parents would know what he was going through as a navigator flying B-24s over here. So imagine what's like. In 1985, I'm 40. I'm just hitting midlife crisis stage. And my mom gives me a book in which my dad has annotated as a 24-year-old how he feels about danger and fear and being part of the war and so forth. Then finally, this is a Model 94 Winchester. I know from the serial number it was made in 1950, so it's about 5 years younger than I am. When I was a little boy in Texas, I developed a nostalgia for rural lifestyles, for subsistence hunting and so forth, and I always wanted one of these old Winchesters. And in 1990, my grad students and postdocs at Berkeley gave me this old gun as a sabbatical present. Now maybe you can imagine how un-PC a firearm was at Berkeley. I'm willing to bet I'm the only Berkeley professor who's ever gotten a Model 94 Winchester as a sabbatical present. But now I told you a little bit about each of these objects, and maybe you can see now how they are laden with value for me, laden with aesthetic value for me, okay? And all I did was provide you a little bit of context. And so what Keister did was to take Kant's distinction and say that we can think about organisms like this. We can pick some organism like the Ritu. I can show you pictures or take you to Brazil and find one, and we can vote on whether it's beautiful or not. Okay? But we can also look at it in a more sublime fashion. I could give you a lecture about the feeding biology and the wondrous other characteristics of snakes, and you might, in fact, value Ritus more highly. So in other words, we can fashion a biologically sublime aesthetic by providing information from science about organisms. We're going to throw in Charles Darwin. Darwin was clearly interested in aesthetics. He clearly had a sense of aesthetic value. This sense is from the last part of the origin. There's grandeur in this view of life that from so simple beginning, endless forms, most beautiful, most wonderful, evolved. And so what I'm going to argue and what I'm going to show you of frogs is that we can take Darwin's famous phrase, descent with modification. So this is the part of Darwin that's not about natural selection. It's not about mechanism of evolution. It's about the pattern of evolution. It's about the fact that life has a history that goes all the way back from us to the beginning of life almost 4 billion years ago. So we can take this Darwinian phrase, descent with modification, and think about it in terms of ancestry, pedigree, legacy. I call it lineage pride. And I'm going to show you some froggy lineage pride here in just a second. We can combine evolution, descent with modification, and natural history, the facts of organismal existence, and fashion this biologically sublime aesthetics. Okay, so that's where, here comes the middle part of the talk. This is the mini herpetology lecture on frog biology. I just checked last night on Amphibian Web. As of yesterday, there are 6,776 described species of frogs. And the number is going up all the time. Sadly, as this number goes up, frogs are going extinct at an unknown rate. But the key thing to realize about frogs, when we start talking about frogs, we got almost 7,000 species. I'm going to show you a little bit, just a snapshot of how diverse they are in natural history. But all of these species are built on the same basic anatomical transformation from a primitive tetrapod lifestyle. Now, by tetrapod, that means literally four-legged. I'm talking about the early conquest of land by the organisms that had 4 limbs and a tail. And what we have today that comes closest to being like the ancestor of frogs are salamanders. Well, here's a Jefferson salamander. It's actually, this picture is taken in the field. You might think it was in the lab from the background, but that's snow. So Jefferson salamander is the first salamander to come out and march to the ponds to breed in the spring. And this is an adult male Jefferson salamander heading towards the breeding pond one March in Ithaca. And what I want you to notice is the asymmetrical gait of this animal. Now it turns out a salamander, and this was surely true of primitive tetrapods in general, moves itself forward mainly by what we call axial bending, not by propulsion with the limbs. What do I mean by axial bending? Well, we're talking about the long axis of the body. So if I do this, I'm exhibiting axial bending, okay? And this salamander, see this little curve there? The limbs are serving mainly as holdfasts, as friction points, and as parts of the body through which force is being exerted. But the propulsion, the force that drives the salamander forward, is mainly coming from bending its body. Now what frogs did over 200 million years ago was to diverge from that primitive locomotor biology, radically change their rear half, and turn themselves into jumping machines. So they reduced the number of vertebrae down to about a dozen. They did really weird things to their pelvises. So we can say the word pelvis, right? Are we all comfortable talking about hips here for a minute? So, hips have various bones. Well, 2 of them are called the ilia. If you put your hands right here, you can feel these sort of shelf-like bones right here at the top of your hips. Those are your ilia. Well, in frogs, the ilia are these long poles that stick forward. So in this model right here, these are the ilia. Okay? Here's the right ilium. Here's the left ilium. This is the end of the backbone right here. And that exposes a very curious thing about frogs. I'm sure you've noticed that when a frog is sitting, it has a bump in its back. Everybody know about that, right? The bump is actually not in the middle of the back. The bump is the end of the back. Okay? So this frog right here, this European tree frog, its vertebral column goes from the back of the skull to right there. And all this right here is pelvis. Okay? Now, not only is it pelvis, but those 2 poles of the ilium that stick forward are movably articulating with the back end of the vertebral column right here. So here's what frogs did. They changed the length of various limb elements. They radically changed their pelvis. And they moved their muscles around enough so that most of the muscle mass is associated with extending the limbs. Okay. So they have muscles that operate around the pelvis backbone joint, around the pelvis upper limb joint, around the upper limb knee lower limb joint, around the lower limb and the ankle bones, and around the ankle bones and the toes. When a frog's eye tells a frog's brain, you should jump, and then the brain tells the frog to jump, almost all the muscle mass around these joints, these joints, these joints, these joints, and these joints fire at once. Seems like it ought to make a noise almost, right? And the result is this. Okay? So a frog really is a jumping machine. All frogs, whether we're talking about the squat-bodied American toad in your garden, the leopard frog on the edge of your pond, the great tree frog sitting outside the window, they're all basically jumping machines. So what they do with that? Well, they built all kinds of modifications on top of that. And here's where the descent modification comes into play. Okay? So every frog you can see in New York, if you go to Costa Rica and see red-eyed tree frogs, you go to Australia and see the introduced cane toads, any frog you see anywhere in the world is built on that jumping machine design, variously modified. Now they did all kinds of crazy things. They repeatedly evolved a protrusible tongue. Okay? This happens to be how the tongue is protruded in our toads. When this tongue is at rest, it's folded backwards into the mouth. Okay, so the toad flips its tongue like that. What was the top back of the tongue becomes the bottom front of the tongue. It's very sticky and slaps on the insect and is drawn back into the mouth. That's just one way of protruding. They developed acoustic behavior, both in terms of making noise and in acoustic sensitivity. So there's all this marvelous music that frogs make, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. But to me, the most amazing thing that frogs did was to invent ways to lay eggs and give birth essentially out of every hole in their body, and some you probably never thought about. So this is a marsupial frog from the Andes of Ecuador. In this species, there's a pouch on the back of the female. Mating is on land. The eggs are fertilized with the male sitting on the female, and then the eggs are pushed into this pouch. And they develop inside this marsupium, this pouch. And they actually develop a placenta-like relationship with the developing froglets. So the female's tissues are intimately connected to developing froglets' tissues, and waste and nutrients are passing back and forth, and oxygen and carbon dioxide are passing back and forth. That's pretty spectacular. But there was, until about 20 years ago, a frog in Australia in which the female ingested the eggs after they were fertilized on land. They went into her stomach. She shut down all gastric function, and her stomach essentially acted like a uterus. And then she would, when the frogs were ready to be born, she regurgitates these little frogs. Now, if that sounds crazy, it gets crazier. There's a frog in Chile called Darwin's frog, a little frog. And in that species, the male ingests the eggs. And then instead of going into his stomach, they go into his vocal sacs. And his vocal sacs essentially become a uterus. And we have this incredibly ironic, oxymoronic phenomenon of a pregnant man, which probably makes about half of us squirm and the other half giggle, right? Okay? So tremendous reproductive diversity. And remember, all this built on fundamental frog use. Now, Kant made a distinction within his notions of sublimity versus beauty. And one of the kinds of sublimity he talked about was mathematical sublimity. So I tried to think about what would be an example of mathematical sublimity in organisms, and particularly in frogs. Well, think about California for a second. So you know what it's shaped like. You know it's a really big state. You probably know it's botanically diverse. It's topographically super diverse. It goes from below sea level to the top of Mount Whitney. So very geologically, latitudinally, botanically diverse place. And it might have now, depending on how you split up species, about 25 species of frogs and toads in the whole state of California. Okay? That's sort of typical temperate frog diversity, although it's a little bit popular on the West Coast. I can take you to ponds in the tropical savannas of Brazil, they're called cerrados, the tropical grasslands of Brazil. I could take you to temporary ponds in Brazil in which you would have that many species of frogs or more breeding in a single pond in the course of a breeding season. At those ponds, we could find in one night 15 or 20 species of frogs breeding on one night. Okay? And they would all be singing, and they would each be singing a different song. The noise would be so loud that the only way we could possibly communicate would be by shouting into each other's ears. Okay? And I think if I took you there, and if you knew that standing there in the dark, getting eaten by bugs and trying to talk about this din, this cacophony of frog calls, that there were as many species right around us and upon the side of this room as inhabit the whole state of California, you would be having a sort of mathematical, biologically sublime experience. You would be having a sublime experience that was affected by numbers, right? That's what he meant by mathematical. Well, Kant also talked about dynamic sublimity, and what he meant by that was a sublime aesthetic experience that depended on size or force or power. And for frogs, what I've come up with is this fossil frog called Bif. What an incredibly great name. Bufo means toad. Beelzebufo. The devil toad. Right? So, this is a Pac-Man frog. It's entirely possible somebody in here has or has had a Pac-Man frog, or that your kids or your grandkids have Pac-Man frog. Very popular in the pet trade. It's a family of frogs endemic to South America. And they're kind of peculiar. The smallest ones are about 3 inches, and the biggest ones are about 6 inches. And they're about half mouth. And they eat other vertebrates. So a 5-inch Pac-Man frog would eat a small mouse or a small bird, for example. And interestingly, although most frogs don't bite defensively, Pac-Man frogs are just ferocious. If you have a pet Pac-Man frog, you stick your hand in the tram, it'll whack like that and then bite your hand. So now I've sort of told you about the demeanor of this frog. Imagine a Pac-Man frog that was this long. Okay, this is how big the Beelzebufo was in the Cretaceous of Madagascar. Imagine walking around barefoot with your little pinky toe sticking out around a frog that was And I'm not sure what to call this, so I'm going to call it mathematical dynamics of living. This is my wife, Kelly. She's a researcher at Cornell, and she studies frogs. She grew up in Brazil, and she studies Brazilian frogs. And these are individually the two smallest and largest frogs I've seen in my entire life, anywhere in the world. Both of them are from Brazil. So this is a big bull male, the so-called pumpkin toadlet. And here it is on Kelly's hand. So that's him right there. That's his bull male brachycephalus. And this is a big toad, Bufo Jimmy. And I'm sorry that I didn't have a soul scale big enough to weigh that toad, because I really would like to know how much it weighs. So again, this kind of size diversity. I'll show you reproductive diversity, feeding diversity. Here's size and shape diversity among these 6,776 species of frogs and toads, all built on that same ruggedness. Now I coined a term. I call it magical stability. And what I mean by this is the sort of joys of being a field naturalist, and especially the joys of discovery. So one night, we were in the Pantanal, Brazil, near the Bolivian border. I was with a woman named Cynthia Prado, who had done her PhD work on this little animal called the Pantanal puddle frog. Here's the female right here. And what Cynthia discovered is that this frog, first of all, the male and female, when they lay their eggs, when she lays the eggs in water, they kick with their feet and they make a meringue-like mass that floats. And this both keeps the tadpoles warm in the sun, but also allows it to be moist. The female remains with this meringue-like egg mass until the eggs hatch, but then she remains with the tadpoles for several weeks until they metamorphose into little frogs. Now, I've actually counted the number of tadpoles in the school. It's right at about 700. I counted for photographs. And Cynthia had studied this for a PhD. She told me about it. We were out at night, a group of us looking for frogs and alacaiman and snakes and stuff. And she said, "Oh, Harry, here's a Leptodactylus pedicellata. You can get pictures for your class." I said, "Great." So I came over and started photographing the little female frog with her tadpoles, which were tightly aggregated around her. And suddenly Cynthia said, "Ah, uma cobra," which means a snake in Portuguese. And I looked to the left, and here was this leopard water snake gobbling up tadpoles. So being a snake biologist, not a frog biologist, I immediately grabbed the snake and pried up its mouth and started pulling tadpoles out and taking pictures. But amazingly, when we look back, things had changed. The school had exploded. So a flock of about 700 tadpoles that occupied an area of maybe 1 square foot had now exploded out to about 1 square yard with the female in the middle. And over the next 20 minutes, the female marched her babies, her tadpoles, 12 yards along the pond shore, away from the direction of the snake predator. So when Cynthia was doing her field work, she had noticed the female would move the school sometime, but she never saw a proximate cause of why did it happen. And we just happened to be lucky enough to be there when a snake attacked the school, and the female led her offspring away from danger. She did it by swimming slowly about a yard, stopping, sticking her rear up in the air, and then kicking. And you can see the waves coming across from here. And the strung out school would catch up to her, and then she'd go about another yard. Stop, kick her hind legs, tadpoles would catch up. There's at least another whole dissertation here. Now, what cues is she using to know when the tadpoles have caught up with her? What cues are they using to catch up with her? How does she know when it's safe and stop moving and so forth? Okay? I literally mean it. There's a wonderful dissertation waiting to be done on this. So that was pretty cool, but then the next night we were out again on this dirt road called the Transmontana, and we encountered 3 family groups of capybara, the world's largest rodent. In each of these groups there was a male and a female and 2 kits, 2 young capybaras. In each case, the family group was sitting directly adjacent to a breeding chorus of this frog, Leptodactylus chicensis. It looks a lot like and is about the same size as our local leopard frog. In each case, the capybaras were sitting erect and motionless. And in each case, there were 2 to 4 frogs hopping around and on the capybaras. And while I watched this particular one, in 60 seconds, this frog flipped its tongue 3 times. So presuming it was successful, it was getting 3 blood-sucking, flesh-biting insects per minute. And you might say, why would that matter to the capybara? But you can just do the math. I mean, if the capybara sat there for an hour, 3 times 60 is 180 insects down the tube with the frogs, right? And then you could calculate the volume of blood that each insect contained and so on and so forth, and estimate the value to the capybaras of sitting near the frog pond. It turns out nobody's ever seen this before. We know a lot about the biology of capybaras. Nobody has ever seen cleaner frogs before. They've seen capybaras standing still in the daytime for egrets to pick things off them, to pick the parasites off, but nobody's ever seen frogs cleaning a mammal before. Cleaner frogs. Who knew? Don't you think that's cool? I think it's incredible. And here's another whole dissertation. So I call it that. Now, I mentioned disabled modification. Let me show you an example of that kind of sublimity. We know a lot about the relationships among these various species of frogs. So this is a super pruned phylogenetic tree, as we call it, a genealogy of the world's frogs. So the way you read these trees is just like a human family tree, except the convention with human family trees is to have the past at the top and to have us down here at the bottom. Me, my brother, my parents, and so forth back in the time. With phylogenetic or evolutionary history trees, the convention is to put the past at the bottom or on the side and have the present at the top. So these are major groups of living frogs and toads. Like I said, I've enormously pruned this tree. If I put all 6,776 species up here, we wouldn't be able to make sense of it. But here are water frogs like our local leopard frog, and wolf frog. Here are tree frogs like our great tree frog, our spring peeper. Here are toads like our American toads. Here's a spadefoot. We actually have an eastern spadefoot toad in New York. Interestingly, this line right here has only got 6 living species. 4 of them are in New Zealand, and 2 of them are what we call the tail frogs of the Pacific Northwest. This is a tail frog in California. It's a pretty drab-looking frog. It's about 2 inches long. And the only thing really noteworthy about it externally is it has this little thing sticking out. Well, it turns out that's only in the male, and it's an intromittent organ, as we formally call it. It's used for internal fertilization. It turns out tail frogs live in really fast-moving streams, and if they did what many frogs do, which is the male just squirts the sperm out on the eggs, a tail frog sperm would just go down to the Pacific eventually, but it wouldn't fertilize any eggs. So it's got this cool little thing here. The basal divergence among all living frogs is between these 6 species and everybody else. Okay? So 6,770 species are in this group on this line, and 6 are over here, 2 of which are these tail frogs in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. and Canada. So I always teach about this in my herpetology class. When I taught at Berkeley, we had a field trip to the redwoods of Mendocino County, and we would make a special journey one day to try to find tail frogs. And one time I came up to my students around a little stream, and they caught a male tail frog, and they had it in their hands, they were looking at it. And as I walked up, I heard one student say, "Wow, isn't that a cool little tool on the rear end of it for internal fertilization?" And then another student said, "Yeah, and think about it. This frog hasn't shared its genes with any other frog on Earth since the Jurassic." And then another student said, "Yeah, we're looking at the basal frog." So that's what I call a biologically sublime experience basal. So I'm going to bring this to a close with a couple of examples that sort of go out more broadly than frogs. I hope I've taught you a little frog biology. I hope the next time you see a toad in your backyard, you'll appreciate it just a little bit more. You'll realize that it's just one of thousands of species that started with this huge innovation in the Jurassic more than 200 million years ago that resulted in rebuilding the back end into a jumping machine. Okay. But now I'd like to take this general theme of using the facts of science, the kinds of things done here at the Carey Institute, for example, and using those facts to reach outward, but still focusing on our values and how values will matter to how we manage the Earth in the future. In Tracks and Shadows, I said if I could, I would give every young naturalist 3 gifts. And I'm just going to tell you what one of them is. If you'd like to know the other two gifts, I guess you'll have to read the book or you can ask me any questions. But one of those gifts would be to be on foot in Africa among the megafauna. And I really do mean on foot. I don't mean in a safari van. It's actually possible to do this. There are national parks in South Africa, for example, where for a very modest fee, you can go out hiking with rangers who know how to navigate on foot among the great beasts of the African savannas. And I've done this repeatedly as a teacher and as a tourist. And I really feel it's one of the most profound experiences of my life to be out on foot among the megafauna, to see the megafauna as it was here in the New World about 10,000 years ago. So what do I take from going to Africa? Well, I've actually drawn 3 insights from it that are relevant to, I think, value of biodiversity and the future of biodiversity. The first one is, we have a conceit in this country that wilderness is a place without people, or it's a place with minimal or non-existent human impact. We even have kind of a phrase for it. It's take only pictures and leave only footprints. Now I know that that's almost a caricature. There's no place that's really without some kind of human impact. But I think we really do idealize wilderness as a place that people don't participate, that people don't play ecological roles. When you're out among the megafauna in Africa, and if you know anything about human prehistory, it really hits you that you could never apply this notion of wilderness to Africa. Okay? If you want Africa without human influence, you have to go back more than 2 million years. You have to go back before we were Homo habilis. The second thing is, and here's the most polite way to put this, food is pristine. Okay? When you walk around where there's an intact megafauna, the quantity and diversity of dung is shocking. There's dung everywhere. And there's not only dung everywhere, it comes in sizes ranging from about your thumbnail to like a cannonball. It comes in aggregations ranging from scattered to huge rhino piles. Okay? It comes in absurdly diverse shapes and textures. It's so diverse that we do student projects in which we have them walk line transects counting different kinds of dung and using these counts of different kinds of dung as estimates of different kinds of mammal abundance. For example, close to a dirt road, where there are cattle or not, and so forth. So, in this country, I think we tend to think of dung as cow pies, as sort of a blight on our wilderness experience. If you go to a place where there's an intact megafauna, dung is absolutely a dominant aspect of local ecosystem biology. And the third thing in Africa is always wary, sometimes terrifying. So you can't walk around in the presence of a megafauna, an attacked megafauna, without being very humble and very cautious and very sort of aware of what the rules are for you as well as everything else. So those 3 things I think are really profound in terms of how we value the landscape. Now my second example comes from cattle, and this might not be quite as shocking an example in the East as it would be in the West, but if I give this talk in the Western U.S., cattle are pretty much universally viewed by conservation biologists as the disgusting scourge on the earth. And yet I'm going to try to convince you that I can take you to a ranch in the Texas Hill Country where you might actually have an enhanced aesthetic experience because of the cattle. So here's what happened. Prior to the loss of most of our megafauna about 12,000 years ago, we actually had an animal called shrub ox in North America that was about the size of a large domestic bull, probably had somewhat similar ecology. It's been gone a long time now. Interestingly, cattle first arrived in the New World with Columbus's ships about 1500, 1502, something like that. These were Iberian cattle, so they were descended from the aurochs, which were the wild version from which cattle were domesticated, and aurochs went extinct in the 1600s. So Columbus brought these Iberian cattle to an island in the Caribbean, and within a very few years, some of his ships with Ponce de Leon took these cattle to Florida, and some of them took them to Mexico. And for the next 500 years, these two now separate propagules of cattle existed largely under wild conditions and under very different wild conditions. So they were subject to natural selection in very different landscapes, leading to, in the subtropical landscapes of Florida, what's called a cracker cattle. Cracker cattle. In Mexico and the southwestern U.S., they're what's now called a Texas longhorn. So they diverged in North America. Neither one of these looks like an Iberian cow today. Neither one of them looks like the Iberian cattle that Columbus brought. These cattle, the cracker cattle, are adapted to subtropical conditions. They don't get hoof rot, stand around in water all day long. They're very resistant to tropical diseases and so forth. These cattle are adapted to semi-arid habitats. During the worst drought in Texas history, this herd that I spent a lot of time with was eating prickly pear plants. Now, it's a little deeper than that. This is a Comanche war shield from the early 19th century. And these are longhorn tails. And if you look on the inside of the shield, they often decorated them for power reasons. This is a longhorn. And it turns out the Kiowa and the Comanche often depicted longhorns in their art. And they depicted them in exactly the same postures, fashion, and context as they depicted bison, suggesting that the Kiowa and Comanche were regarding longhorns not as domestic animals in a context only with sort of white people advancing on their terraces, but in the context of wild, large bobbins, wild, large ungulates that lived in the same ecosystems. So I'm content that if I could take you to the hill country of Texas and get you out on the Double Helix Ranch, where I spend a lot of my time, thanks to a friend, and if I told you these facts about our, I would call arguably native North American cattle, that you might actually find the experience more positive for the presence of the cattle, more positive when you watch them and saw. For example, David, the rancher, never loses calves to predators. You know, all the surrounding ranches do. You know why? Would you bother want to see them in his calves? He never has to help deliver his calves. So it turns out to be the case that for most of the so-called improved European breeds, we bred for such giant calves that a cow's first calf is often difficult. And sometimes the rancher or farmer has to actually reach in, sometimes actually tie a rope around the calf and pull it. Well, David never has to do that because his calves come out at about 40 pounds. They just plop out, okay? And they're ready to go for a start. My last example involves the California Condor. So this is the New World's largest vulture. It was, until a few hundred years ago, found coast to coast. By the 19th century, its range was rapidly shrinking. By the time I moved to Berkeley in 1978, it was almost extinct. I remember, as a new assistant professor at Berkeley, the extremely bitter controversy about what to do about this bird. And it was not only was it bitter, but it was public, and it was between two groups that normally align themselves within conservation biology. One group was idealistic, was led by people like David Brower, founder of the Sierra Club, who said things like, a condor with a radio on it is not a condor anymore. A condor in a zoo is only half a condor. How can you take these birds out of the wild when we don't even know why they're dying? Let's let them die with dignity. Okay? That was the watchword, that was the slogan on one side. The other side said, we can't afford to lose the world's biggest vulture. And we should try everything possible to say that even though we're sort of stumbling in the dark and we don't know what the cause of extinction is. We do know what the cause is now, but we didn't then. Well, the second group won. The last 22, 23 California condors were removed from the wild in 1987. They were first put in San Diego Zoo, and then later some were put in the Los Angeles Zoo. With some trial and error, it was learned how to breed them in captivity. Turns out to not be that hard once you get it right. And the bottom line is, after tens of millions of dollars, and we still spend about $5 million a year keeping condors out there. After tens and tens of millions of dollars, we now have something like 400 birds flying over western North America from occasionally southern Oregon all the way into Baja California. All of these birds, each of these birds has a numbered patch on it and a radio locating transmitter on it. The cause of the condor's decline and their extinction is It gets that from lead and the carcasses it eats, and that lead comes almost entirely from hunters' shattered bullets. So we know how to fix it. Efforts are underway right now to solve that. I personally think it's going to get fixed. But right now we spend about $5 million a year to bring each bird in periodically, check it for lead poisoning, and if necessary, essentially dialysize it right there, and then let the bird go again. So there's certainly a sense in which these birds are not sterile, still wild. And it's costing us a lot of money to keep them out there in this sort of artificial situation. So I never saw a condor when I was a young assistant professor at Berkeley. I never saw one in the wild when they were still wild like that. Much later, I began backpacking in the Colorado Plateau area. I spent a lot of time there. I was always looking for a condor. Never saw one. I never saw one. And then 4 years ago, my brother and our wives took one of these boat trips. And we got in at Lee's Ferry. You can go for 14 days in Grand Canyon on a boat. Kelly and I didn't think we could stand that. So we did the 5-day trip, and then you have to hike out. So here are 17 people. They drop off at the base of Bright Angel Trail, and you hike up. Well, I was the oldest person, 17. The youngest was about 10. I think that 10-year-old went up Bright Angel, which is 9 miles and 4,000 foot elevation. I think that 9-year-old went up in like 3 hours. So late in the day, it's like 5 o'clock. I've long since been left behind by everybody. I'm 67 years old at that point. I'm feeling kind of grumpy. I'm tired. I'm coming around the second to the last switchback. I'm actually fantasizing about a platform burial. Native Americans, the carcass up on this platform. And I thought, I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool, that not only would I not be tickled and put it on the ground and all that, but one coyote could take one humerus that way, and another coyote could take a femur that way. And I stopped to take a drink of water, and I looked up, and there was a silver storm cloud right over me, and circling right over me against that silver storm cloud were 2 giant black birds. And you know how if you're used to seeing red-tailed hawks and you see a golden eagle in the distance, you don't really need the field march. You go, whoa, I think that's a golden eagle because it's so much bigger than it would be if it's a red-tailed. I looked up, and before I noted the white underwings and the slotted primaries, I knew these were my first California condors. And I looked up and I shook my fist and I said, I'm not ready for you yet. I'm not kidding. I blurted out, worth every penny. Worth every penny. So this is what I'm going to leave you with. I love this saying. It was actually said in public by a Senegalese conservationist named Babadium in the late 1970s at an IUCN meeting. And I think it encapsulates my point, which is, well, here you see the quote, we'll conserve what we love what we understand, and understand what we're taught. And we need to add, what we get taught gets found out by somebody. Okay? It gets found out by people like Josh and Rick and the other scientists here at the Carey Institute. It's found out by people like me. Okay? And then we and other people translate these facts of natural history, this evolutionary ecological context, into a sort of greater meaning about these organisms. And when we do that, some of us at least change our values about these organisms. Okay? And I'm going to leave you with this. This quote right here is from one of my favorite books. I talk about it, Tracks and Shadows. The Earth is mostly just a bone yard, but pretty good. Thanks for your attention. I appreciate it. Anybody want to go see some longhorns? I'm happy to answer questions. Yes, sir.
What should we be doing about extinctions?
What should we be doing about extinction? Is that your question? Wow! What a whopper of a question. What should we be doing about extinctions? You know, It's an incredibly complicated problem. There are more than 7 billion of us right now, and under any projection, regardless of what we do or don't do about population, globally in an individual country, it's going to go up quite a lot before it levels off. We don't know whether it's going to level off in a sort of kindly, humane way or in some sort of catastrophic way. So we're going to keep having increasing impact on the environment. Those impacts can be fairly subtle, like the frog crisis. I mean, we really didn't know why frogs were disappearing for about 10 years. Or they can be really dramatic, like forest clearing. So the solutions are really multiple and complicated and to some extent specific to particular issues. So I don't think there's one answer. But I think that we desperately need a sort of global mindset shift towards caring about it more and sort of dedicating ourselves to changing things. And, you know, that can be to some extent up to us individually. I personally think it needs to come at larger levels, though. I don't think it's enough that we could hope that we would just individually make all these decisions and behave differently as we each choose to, and that it's going to make major shifts. Because I personally think that we're too inclined to sort of get annoyed when we notice everybody else isn't playing well. And so I think we need consensus at some level about solving these problems. I know that's a real glib answer, but you ask how dangerous. Yes, ma'am.
I have a little micro question now, but I think micro question.
Okay.
The female frog with the large, the little frogs.
The bullfrogs?
Yeah, where she could take them around.
Yeah.
In what time frame does she do that? And can she actually do that fast enough to get away from the snake?
That's a good point. She did it. She moved. What I know is that she moved them 12 yards in 20 minutes. So that's how long we stayed watching her. And so I don't know exactly how to relate that to the consumption ability of that individual water snake.
The chances are she loses some, but she gets them out.
Yeah, and I have a hard time believing that water snake could. I don't believe. I mean, I study snake feeding, so I'm pretty sure that snake could not have eaten all 700. I think some would survive, and one could even imagine it's a bit of a selection experiment right there. I mean, who's going to get eaten by the snake?
It's like when watching ducks, a lot of ducks with
Exactly. And like that Far Side guy too, where I don't need to run, I don't need to be the fastest, I just need to be faster than you. Yes, sir.
Is that Ritu snake a venomous snake or not venomous?
Which one?
That beautiful snake that you...
Oh, the Ritu.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous snake. It's a pit viper. So, yes, it's a very dangerous snake. I'm supposed to be repeating the question, I just remembered. Yeah, are you all hearing the questions okay?
No.
No. Should I go back to the first one? He asked what are you doing about extinctions. She said, how long will it take the mama frog to move those tadpoles? And then he asked about the Ritu, and is it dangerous? It's a very dangerous snake. You would be very unhappy if that snake bit you. And you might die.
You were pretty close to photograph.
Yes, but that's my research specialty is vipers, and so I'm pretty comfortable, and I've never been bitten in the field. I'm pretty comfortable and very respectful around them. That caused me to say something about walking among the megafauna. So if you go and go on, what for example South African National Forest calls a wilderness trek, which was 3 days of hiking, way off road with 2 armed rangers. We walked through a Cape buffalo herd once, and we had many encounters with elephants and rhinos that were within the size of shrimp rolls. And what impressed me so much about these 2 rangers that were guiding us was they understood the discomfort distance for those big mammals the way I understand the discomfort distance for a pit viper. So I could have you around any viper in the world, but if I had a snake hook and a little bit of room, we could take pictures completely safely without hurting the snake or us. That's because I have a lot of experience with the behavior of those animals. These guys were like that with elephants. They really impressed me. And I imagine that people who live around elephants and rhinos and so forth as hunter-gatherers and so forth must have to have similar experience-based knowledge of how to stay out of the discomfort zones. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of a presidential campaign right now. And, perhaps most of us are aware of this, first of all. But I've been kind of shocked as an educator, someone who cares deeply about the environment, that it's really been a non-issue. I mean, there was like half a line from Hillary Clinton about climate change, the debate the other night.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of perhaps the sixth mass extinction.
Yeah.
Are we doing something wrong as educators? Is it the media? Why is the environment ranked so low now in terms of priorities among the electorate? Do you have any insights that perhaps you can offer as to again, what needs to change so that the public is more concerned and politicians don't display such timidity? Perhaps it has something to do with what happened to Al Gore 15, 16 years ago, but what insights can you offer?
Well, I agree with you, first of all. I mean, it's sort of stunning. And it's stunning that the news media doesn't push it more. That the news media doesn't demand and demand with facts, demand with examples and so forth that our politicians address these things more publicly. And I presume, certainly not my area of expertise, but I presume that's at least in part because it's savvy politically at this point, this stage, et cetera, to not talk about it. Right? I mean, I can't believe that they're strategically failing to do it. I think they're strategically failing to do it because they think it's a good strategy to minimize addressing it. And at least one of the problems must be because it's so complicated to solve. Another problem is that there's so much polarization and division among us about how we value nature or not. I think for those of us who care about nature and want to push our country, the world, and so forth in the direction of preserving as much as possible, coexisting as much as possible, that education is everything. And the more we can do it with younger people, the better. And I do see reasons for optimism at those levels, but I'm not seeing it on CNN at 6 o'clock with Little Blizzard. I've had this pipe dream. I've had this pipe dream for about 20 years now, I think. Well, I can tell you when it started. I don't be clear. The day I read in the New York Times that George Bush asked for a meeting with Bono, I mean, it was an epiphany for me. Really. I mean, I'm more a Rolling Stones guy myself, but I know that Bono, I mean, he didn't ask for an appointment with George Bush. George Bush asked for an appointment with Bono, the lead singer of U2. That just blew my mind. It really hit me. I remember the rest of the day I was thinking about it. And the second thing I thought was, well, I sure wish Bono cared about nature, which he really doesn't, I don't think. He's got, global health and poverty. And I feel the same way about Bill Gates. And so I started thinking, we need somebody like Bono for frogs. And so I was trying to think, well who can I get? And I've noticed that as a teacher, as a field teacher, that when you can get people out there, and preferably get them muddy, preferably get them completely soaked, and then you put in their hands a live ringneck snake, or a marsupial frog that you can see little froglets in the crack of the pouch. I mean, it's transformative, people are not the same from then on. There's like a life before that and a life after. So I thought, well, who would I like to flip, so to speak? And I decided on Oprah. I thought about it because, Oprah has to a book. It's incredible. I mean, that woman has tremendous reach. So I thought, and so I started fantasizing, me and Oprah in a pond. Muddy, catching frogs. And I've gotten to do it within about 2 people of Oprah. I know somebody who knows somebody who knows Oprah. I've not succeeded yet. But I think that would be one thing, and being, like, who would be the most prominent person you could think of who's a That's almost, I mean, there's Jane Goodall, right? But she came from within us. I'm talking about from without. I think Leonardo DiCaprio might be. He's pretty big, but I don't think he's as big as Oprah. I don't think he has a clout that Oprah would have. Or Springsteen, my God. One more question? Okay.
Why do you think the United Nations is not more effective in this regard?
Wow. Thought about deer hunting or something? I don't know the answer to that. I don't want to act like I have any expertise in that. Do you know?
No, I don't. I just would assume that's the route to go.
Ah, that's interesting. You asked about the United Nations
Yeah,
and whether or not that might be the route to go. I don't know the answer to that.
Miley Cyrus.
What?
Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus. Oh. I do know who that is.
She loves her dog, and she's warm. She loves nature.
Oh, cool. Cool.
So I'll mention that Usain Bolt is a spokesperson for cheetah. That makes sense to me. The fastest man, the fastest animal. I'd like to thank Harry for a tremendous talk.